So here's number one. I transferred this from video. It's a feature-length, just on the cusp of McCarthy-era anti-communist film that was made 1952. And most of the film is the typical 1950s anti-communist stuff. I condensed it down to 16 minutes, so it's like a feature length that I condensed down. I took the guts out of it. But the interesting thing is it starts out as this anti-communist film, and it spends the majority of the middle really appealing to the worried anti-communists in the United States. And then unlike going like McCarthy hearings route, it takes a turn and finishes off with, yes, you know, we hate communism, and yes, communism is the threat, and yes, there are American communists that want to take down the government, and blah, 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 but, and then there's this but, and it takes a dog-eared turn at the end to give a finale which is unexpected, but very poignant for today. So it's just an unusual film, and so I condensed it down. It's called The Hoaxsters. So here it is, Voice from the Past, The Hoaxsters, 1952, American film.
Revolutionary, ladies and gentlemen, the secret process of the age, the medical discovery of the age. This snake oil will cure anything that ails you. Regular doctors don't believe it.
Medicine man, old-fashioned style. Hoaxster, snake oil salesman, loud-talking hustler who promises everything and delivers nothing. That snake oil he's selling wouldn't cure a flea bite, but he sure got a lot of customers. Just listen to him.
I promise you that this particular formula will make you a Superman, bigger and stronger than anybody else. And remember, it will bring you strength and joy.
Medicine man, hoaxster, Nazi style. Death insurance salesman. He too had a big sucker list, millions and millions of them. Hoaxster, patron of the big lie. Today, Germany. Tomorrow, the world. The hoaxsters, the mad medicine men of history, made their pick. They made a promise of a bright new world. Hitler, kaput.
I promise you that this is the most potent, the most powerful brand in the world. This secret revolutionary formula makes every man a king.
Medicine man, fascist style. Hoaxster, another snake oil salesman with millions of victims. Seller of dreams, glory, and empire. They advertised an elixir of peace and prosperity for the old and for the young. Mussolini, morto.
I've got the secret formula. So buy it. Buy it now. Don't be a weakling. Be a leader.
Medicine man, militarist style. Hoaxster, totalitarian teller of tall tales. The victims listen, and the snake oil keeps flowing. Shining illusions of world glory and conquest. Peace parade in Moscow. Medicine men still in business, still advertising the same old snake oil. Peace, brother. This scene has a strange ring of uneasy familiarity. The dogged tramp of infantry boots, the roar of the crowd, the number one boy, the military tom-tom. You've seen newsreel pictures like this before. Where? Berlin. Rome. Tokyo. They're all pretty much alike, aren't they? The pomp, the power, the panoply, the supranationalism, the one-leader principle. Yes, they're all alike. We know that. We've known it a long time.
The Soviet Union is a matter of practical fact, known to you and known to all the world. It is run by a dictatorship as absolute as any other dictatorship in the world.
There's no difference between dictators.
If you believe in the one, you lean toward the other.
They're all alike.
And I'm opposed to fascism as I am opposed to communism.
In our enemy countries of World War II, concentration camps swarmed with slaves. The totalitarians packed untold millions of their own nationals behind barbed wire in order to smother even the faintest whisper of opposition or difference of opinion.
We can show you no pictures of slave camps in communist Russia because the Politburo has dropped the Iron Curtain on this evil official red activity. But the American Federation of Labor, in conjunction with friendly governments, made a documented survey, and it is now certain that 14 million forced laborers crawl under the iron boot of the Soviet Slave Labor Trust. The dots on this map represent known locations of communist concentration camps.
You may think these pictures were taken in Stuttgart, Germany. They were not. This is America, August 1935. This is an American Bundist youth group, directed by agents from the Propaganda Bureau in Berlin. More American Nazis in a public meeting, preaching Nazi hatred and hailing Hitler. Imported brutality, Nazi style.
On VJ Day, we celebrated. On Memorial Day, we mourned and honored our dead. We retooled our minds, our morals, and our machinery for peace, and vowed that our first order of business would be a determined effort to outlaw war. And so in San Francisco, we launched an instrument for peace, the United Nations, an international body dedicated to world security, An organization that represents the hope of free people all through the world, that one day differences will always be composed at council tables and not on battlegrounds. Back home came our soldiers, our sailors, our Marines, and our airmen. We retooled our military industry into a peacetime industry. We held peace parades, real peace parades with big brass bands, real peace parades with full, happy hearts, for at long last, the world was at peace. We knew the military war was over, but we knew that the war of ideas, the social, the economic, the political war, was continuing. And we felt that we could win this war of ideas. As far back as 1943, 2 years before the war ended, we joined in concert with the other free nations of the world in a positive plan for peace. It was called UNRRA, and to the stricken countries the Allies had liberated went food, clothing, and materiel. This is being a good neighbor. As UNRRA came to the end of its delegated task, we were beset with the problems of how to deal further with the tortured economy of the world. The answer to this challenging problem came in the courageous form of the Marshall Plan.
We must not fail to meet this inspiring challenge. We must not permit the free community of Europe to be extinguished. Should this occur, it would be a tragedy for the world. We can act for our own good by acting for the world's good.
The Marshall Program was a sound program of enlightened self-interest, a realistic matter of protecting world peace by rescuing from fear, apathy, and poverty millions and millions of Europeans and Asians. And today, instead of a Europe and a Mediterranean area in the hands of the Kremlin, its 270 million people are our allies in the struggle to maintain peace with freedom and justice. In addition to economic security, there also had to be a provision for military security. For, as General Marshall declared at the time,
You're confronted by the simple fact that one government has the greatest military force in time of peace in history. And it's within walking distance of all of Europe. The only solution that I see is to establish a firm front.
that firm front is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, originally under General Eisenhower and now under General Ridgway. In this firm front, 14 free nations have joined their heads and their hearts and their arms under the NATO banner to protect their free institutions. The United States, England, France, Canada, Iceland, Norway, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, Luxembourg, Italy, Portugal, Greece, Turkey. Vigilance is the price of liberty.
When the Reds' propaganda barrage via Radio Moscow stepped up its incessant chatter, the State Department set up a system of radio broadcast to dull its impact. We also set up our own international radio system, Counter Broadcast, the Voice of America. When the Reds dropped the steel drape over Berlin, we shattered it with the famous airlift. A superb bit of aerial logistics which set the entire Red European policy back on its cleated heels. When the Reds complained that the FBI was staring too hard and casting illegal glances in their direction, the FBI unblinkingly continued to do the same unflinching job it did in the days when the Nazis were making the same vicious attacks on the orbit of our internal security. When the Reds set up a wild, negative clamor against the United Nations' generous policy on the internationalizing of the atom bomb,
reaction came from the Honorable Winston Churchill.
Nothing stands between Europe today and complete subjugation to communist tyranny but the atomic bomb in American possession.
The early American citizenry, which hewed a nation from a wilderness, built a set of principles that became the pattern of freedom for all men everywhere on earth. Today, that pattern still holds, for we are a strong, robust, growing nation with a deep reservoir of material and natural resources. But our greatest strength, our greatest resource, is our spirit and our faith, our undying, unremitting belief in freedom. We are a people raised in the heritage of free ideas, and these ideas of democracy and freedom can eventually force communism to abandon its twisted delusion of world domination. But in continuing to make communism ineffective, we must not betray our own principles. For there are violent, angry voices in the land, homegrown tyrants who play the reckless game of slander in order to achieve other ends. It is not enough to be anti-communist. That doesn't mark the measure of a man's love for democracy. Remember, Hitler was an anti-communist and accomplished his Nazi reign of hate and terror by the violence of his cries against communism. What we are for is important. Beware the hoaxers with different bottles to sell. Beware the fearful gossip mongers, the lunatic fringe, the calamity howlers,
He's a fascist.
the ersatz patriots,
He's a liberal, a bleeding heart, a do-gooder.
the hate smiths,
He reads too much. He talks just like a college professor.
the grubby demagogues screaming for the crackpot vote.
I'm 100% American.
I'm 200% American.
300%.
400%.
500%.
600%. That's what my snake oil is. 600 too.
Amid the clang and clatter of clashing ideologies is still heard the voice of the hoaxer, trying to destroy America in the name of America. But the multitudes who once listened to this voice of doom have dwindled down to a mere handful. For no hoax, by whatever name it is called, can measure up to the shining truth of the human decency we call freedom, of the human hope we call liberty. In the better world of the future, dictators will fall not at the point of a gun, but at the point of the truth, and that free-born men and women under God will ignore the loud shout of the big lie and listen instead to the quiet voice of the big truth.
Well, there you go. I thought it was interesting how they set up the Axis powers of World War II and the various military leaders and the way that they acted. Seems a little familiar to the current state of things in my country. But you notice that it took that turn at the end where they set it up that, yeah, anti-communist, these communists are a threat, they're going to they want to destroy America, but it says, let's not forget our values. And it's interesting, they said that the doomsayers and the people who are trying to rile people up and use defamation, and the people who wanted to, name names, and the accusatory fear-mongering and everything, and how it says, well, it's good that people these days in 1952 aren't really responding to that anymore. Well, that really changed. Same old snake oil, only now, thanks to the phone, the smartphone, gave us a new way to bring people back into the fold, where people can choose their own reality and never leave. They kind of had that in Germany and Japan, where before mass media, before television, there really was no way to get into those cultures with other ideas, so that it sort of was the 20th century equivalent of social media, just in the fact that people were landlocked culturally by language, and so people could fall into their own bubbles, and early 20th century. And those pieces of footage that they had of the American Bundescamps, those really happened. There was a very good documentary made a few years ago about the American German nationalist movement in the 1930s. And those camps were located mostly throughout New York State and northern New Jersey. That big rally that they showed, that very brief clip, that was Madison Square Garden in New York City, and it was full. Maximum capacity crowd at Madison Square Garden for that big rally. And of course they put the tagline in there. They kind of defer blame in this film saying, organized by the German propaganda machine. But no, I mean, this was American-born. These were Americans. It has nothing to do with Berlin. These were American Germans who were nationalists. It was all done here in America. And before America got involved in the war, there was a very large and growing homegrown fascist movement in the United States. And they did try to do a violent overthrow of the U.S. government. They had people in place. There was a conspiracy to try to install a fascist regime in the United States just before the war. There's the DAF, which was the Deutsche Amerikanische Freundschaft, which was sort of the peacetime coalition of German Americans and German nationals. Very famously, the German pavilion at the 1939 World's Fair never really opened because by the time the fair opened in 1939, they had annexed Poland, and so they had shut down the German pavilion. But yeah, no one today, unless you read about those things or have known about those things, would know that the American role in the rise of fascism in Europe. So it's like all those New York Nazis, what happened to them? Did they evaporate in 1941? Did they become blue-blooded American patriots against Germany? No. It's like what happened to all of the fascists in Germany? All the people in those crowds, were they all killed in the war? No. But after the war, you couldn't find a Nazi anywhere. It was just, they all disappeared. Yeah, no, they didn't go anywhere. But yeah, people who do not know history, or people who want to forget history, are doomed to repeat it.
In the lab. That's where I work. In the lab. Go berserk. In my lab. That's where I work. That's what you're watching. Friend love. That's what I'm doing. Working at the bench again.